In a vast, bustling office that floated somewhere in the cold emptiness of space, there was a clerk named Zog. Zog wasn't special, just another worker among thousands who kept the galaxy running. His job? To shuffle papers, process forms, and make sure people ended up where they were supposed to go. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. On Wednesday, December 24th, 2025, Zog was feeling particularly tired. He'd been working overtime for days, trying to clear a backlog of transfer requests. The intergalactic administrative hub, where he worked, buzzed with activity as usual, but today felt different. Maybe it was the holiday season looming over everyone's heads, or maybe it was just the endless stream of glowing screens that made his eyes hurt. Whatever it was, Zog wasn't paying attention like he should have. That's when it happened. A tiny mistake with big consequences. Zog glanced at a form on his desk. It belonged to Kayla Vera, a quiet data analyst from Sector 7C. Her file said she needed to be transferred to a research outpost near Proxima Centauri. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just another routine assignment. But instead of sending her information to the correct department, Zog accidentally clicked the wrong button. In an instant, Kayla's name appeared on a list meant for Helios Prime Academy, one of the deadliest military schools in the entire galaxy. Helios Prime wasn't a place for ordinary people. It trained warriors fighters so skilled and ruthless that their reputations struck fear into enemies across the stars. Cadets went through grueling tests designed to break them physically and mentally. Most didn't survive the first week. It was no place for someone like Kayla, whose greatest weapon was her sharp mind, not her fists. But Zog didn't notice the error. He hit to submit without a second thought, sealing Kayla's fate. By the time he realized what he'd done, the system had already locked her in. There was no undoing it now. All Zog could do was mutter under his breath about clerical chaos before shutting down his terminal and heading home early. Meanwhile, light years away, Kayla sat at her workstation, sipping synthetic coffee. She liked her job well enough. It was peaceful, predictable, and gave her plenty of time to think. Numbers and patterns were her comfort zone, and she excelled at finding solutions to problems others couldn't even see. People often described her as calm, almost unnervingly so. No matter what happened, Kayla always seemed to take things in stride. That day, however, something unusual occurred. A message popped up on her screen, a notification about her upcoming transfer. At first, she thought it must be a joke. Why would anyone send her to Helios Prime? She hadn't signed up for anything like that. Still, Kayla read the details carefully. The letter confirmed her enrollment, complete with dates and instructions for arrival. It looked official. Most people would have panicked. They might have called the administrative hub, demanded answers, or tried to fight the decision. Not Kayla. Instead, she smiled faintly, as if the whole thing amused her. Perhaps deep down, she understood that life rarely followed plans anyway. Or maybe she saw this unexpected twist as an opportunity rather than a disaster. Whatever the reason, Kayla decided not to resist. She packed her belongings methodically, taking only what she needed. Clothes, a few personal items, and her trusty datapad filled with books and notes. Then she boarded the transport shuttle bound for Helios Prime, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey itself was uneventful, though long. Kayla spent most of her time reading or gazing out the window at the endless expanse of stars. Occasionally, other passengers would strike up conversations, curious about her destination. When they learned she was headed to Helios Prime, their reactions ranged from disbelief to outright horror. "You don't look like the type," one man remarked, eyeing her slight frame and gentle demeanor. "Are you sure you're going to the right place?" Kayla simply nodded, her expression unchanged. "I suppose we'll find out," she replied, her tone calm and measured. Her words left the man speechless. For someone facing such a daunting challenge, Kayla showed no signs of fear or even concern. If anything, she seemed almost excited. When the shuttle finally arrived at its destination, Kayla stepped off into a world unlike anything she'd ever seen. Helios Prime Academy loomed before her, a fortress carved out of dark stone and surrounded by swirling clouds of ionized gas. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath her feet felt hard and unforgiving. Around her, other recruits milled about, some flexing cybernetic limbs, others exchanging stories of past battles. Everyone radiated confidence, or at least pretended to. Kayla stood apart from the crowd, observing quietly. Her smile remained firmly in place, soft and enigmatic. To those watching, she looked completely out of place. Yet there was something about her presence that drew attention. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, poised and unhurried, as if she knew something no one else did. Or maybe it was the simple fact that she didn't seem afraid. Whatever the reason, Kayla quickly became a topic of conversation among the other cadets. Some dismissed her as a fluke, certain she wouldn't last more than a day. Others were intrigued, wondering how someone so seemingly ordinary had ended up here. But none of them could deny the spark of curiosity she ignited as the hours passed and the reality of her situation settled in. Kayla continued to smile. She didn't know exactly what awaited her inside those forbidding walls, but she was ready to meet it head-on. After all, mistakes sometimes led to unexpected opportunities, and Kayla intended to make the most of hers. Little did she know, her arrival at Helios Prime would set off a chain reaction that would change not only her life, but the Academy itself. The first thing Kayla noticed as she stepped closer to Helios Prime Academy was the noise. It wasn't just the hum of machinery or the distant roar of engines. It was the sound of chaos. Cadets shouted orders at each other, drills echoed through the air, and explosions from training exercises rattled the ground beneath her feet. The place felt alive, but not in a comforting way. It was more like standing on the edge of a storm, waiting for it to swallow you whole. Kayla adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath. Her calm demeanor hadn't changed since arriving, though she could feel the tension radiating off everyone around her. Most of the recruits were already showing signs of stress. Some paced anxiously, others cracked their knuckles or muttered under their breath. A few even looked ready to bolt back onto the shuttle that had brought them here. But Kayla? She simply stood still, her eyes scanning the scene with quiet interest. Her gaze eventually landed on the massive structure looming ahead. Helios Prime Academy looked less like a school and more like a fortress built to withstand an alien invasion. Its jagged spires pierced the sky, and its walls seemed impenetrable. Thick clouds of ionized gas swirled around it, giving the entire place an eerie glow. If Kayla hadn't known better, she might have thought she'd stepped into some ancient battlefield instead of an educational institution. As she walked toward the main entrance, she couldn't help but notice how different she looked compared to the others. Many cadets wore heavy armor or carried weapons strapped to their backs. Some had cybernetic enhancements, glowing eyes, metallic limbs, or reinforced exoskeletons. One man near her flexed his bionic arm, clearly proud of it. Another woman sharpened a blade while glaring at anyone who dared come too close. Everyone seemed eager to prove they belonged here. But Kayla? She wore plain clothes, carried only a small bag, and didn't appear armed in any way. To the casual observer, she looked completely out of place. Yet she moved with purpose, her steps steady and unhurried. Her smile remained faint but constant, as if she found the whole situation amusing rather than terrifying. Inside the academy, things only grew louder and more chaotic. Recruits were herded into a large auditorium where rows of uncomfortable metal seats awaited them. The room smelled faintly of oil and sweat, and the walls were covered in scorch marks, a reminder of past battles fought within these very halls. At the front of the room stood Commander Draven, a towering figure clad in black armor etched with scars. His presence alone commanded silence, even before he spoke. Draven's voice boomed like thunder when he addressed the group. "Listen up," he began, his tone sharp and unforgiving. "You are here because you think you're tough. You think you can survive anything. Let me tell you right now, you're wrong. This academy will break you. It will test every limit you have, and then it will push further. If you make it through, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined. If you don't—" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Well, no one will remember your name." His piercing gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on each recruit. When his eyes met Kayla's, he hesitated. There was something about her that caught him off guard. Not fear, not arrogance, but calmness. She sat there with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression serene, as if she were listening to a lecture rather than a threat. For a moment, Draven wondered if she truly understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Then again, maybe she did, and that smile meant she wasn't worried at all. Shaking off the thought, Draven continued his speech. "This is not a game. This is war. And if you want to leave here alive, you'll need to earn it." With that, he turned and left the stage, leaving the recruits to process his words. After orientation, the real challenges began. The first task was a physical endurance test designed to weed out the weak early on. Recruits were sent to run laps around the academy's perimeter, which stretched for miles across uneven terrain. Along the way, they encountered obstacles, walls to climb, pits to leap over, and drones programmed to chase them down. Those who fell behind or failed to complete the course were immediately dismissed. Kayla watched as others sprinted ahead, fueled by adrenaline and determination. She didn't rush. Instead, she studied the course carefully, noting patterns in the drone movements and identifying shortcuts hidden among the rocks and debris. When the drones closed in, she ducked behind cover or used nearby objects to block their sensors. Her pace was steady, deliberate, and efficient. By the time she crossed the finish line, many of the faster runners had already collapsed from exhaustion. When the results were announced later that evening, Kayla's name appeared near the top of the list. No one expected her to perform so well, not the instructors, not the other cadets, and certainly not herself. Yet there she was, proving that speed wasn't everything. The next day brought another challenge: hand-to-hand combat training. Cadets were paired off and instructed to fight until one of them surrendered or was knocked unconscious. Again, Kayla stood out not because of her strength, but because of her strategy. While others relied on brute force, she focused on timing and precision. She dodged attacks, waited for openings, and struck only when necessary. Her opponent, a burly man twice her size, grew frustrated as she evaded his blows without breaking a sweat. In the end, she won not by overpowering him, but by wearing him down until he gave up. By the third day, rumors about Kayla were spreading throughout the academy. Some called her lucky. Others whispered that she might actually know what she was doing. Even Commander Draven started paying closer attention, intrigued by how someone so seemingly fragile could hold her own against seasoned fighters. Still, Kayla remained unfazed. She treated each challenge like a puzzle to solve, analyzing variables and adapting her approach as needed. Despite her success, Kayla knew she wasn't invincible. The academy pushed its cadets harder with each passing day, testing not just their bodies, but their minds. Sleep deprivation became routine, meals were sparse, and the pressure to succeed mounted constantly. Many recruits broke under the strain, either quitting outright or making costly mistakes during exercises. Kayla saw this firsthand when a fellow cadet accidentally triggered a live-fire simulation during a nighttime drill. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and laser rounds ricocheted off the walls. People screamed and scrambled for cover, but Kayla stayed calm. She quickly identified the safest route to escape, guiding several others to safety before the exercise ended. Afterward, those she'd helped thanked her profusely, calling her brave and resourceful. Kayla just shrugged, saying it was nothing special. To her, survival wasn't about heroics. It was about staying observant and thinking ahead. That mindset set her apart from the rest, earning her both admiration and suspicion. As the days turned into weeks, Kayla continued to adapt. She learned to navigate the Academy's complex social hierarchy, avoiding unnecessary conflicts while forming alliances with those who shared her pragmatic outlook. She also discovered ways to use the system to her advantage, exploiting loopholes in training protocols to conserve energy or gain extra resources. Slowly but surely, she carved out a niche for herself in a world that initially seemed determined to crush her. Through it all, her smile never faded. Whether she was dodging a drone, disarming an opponent, or navigating yet another grueling obstacle course, Kayla faced every challenge with the same quiet confidence. To outsiders, it might have looked like arrogance or worse, ignorance. But those who paid attention realized the truth. Kayla Vera wasn't just surviving Helios Prime, she was thriving. And she wasn't done yet. By the time Kayla reached her 3rd month at Helios Prime Academy, the initial shock of her presence had worn off. The other cadets no longer stared at her as if she were an alien species they'd never seen before. Instead, they watched her with a mix of curiosity and cautious respect. She wasn't just surviving, she was excelling. And yet, she did it in ways that defied everything the Academy stood for. Helios Prime prided itself on producing warriors who relied on strength, aggression, and raw instinct. Its training programs were designed to break down every weakness, leaving behind only the fiercest and most ruthless fighters. But Kayla didn't fit that mold. She didn't have cybernetic enhancements or years of combat experience. What she had instead was something far rarer, a mind that worked like a machine, analyzing patterns, predicting outcomes, and finding solutions where others saw only chaos. This became especially clear during one of the Academy's most infamous exercises, a live-fire simulation called the Gauntlet. It was a test of strategy, teamwork, and sheer willpower. Teams of cadets were dropped into a sprawling battlefield filled with traps, automated defenses, and enemy units controlled by instructors. The goal was simple: capture a heavily guarded flag and bring it back to base. Failure meant elimination or worse, public humiliation in front of the entire Academy. Kayla's team drew straws to decide roles, and unsurprisingly, she ended up as their strategist. At first, her teammates weren't thrilled about following orders from someone who looked more like a librarian than a soldier. But Kayla didn't waste time arguing. She studied the map provided, noting choke points, blind spots, and potential ambush locations. Then she outlined a plan so detailed it left even the skeptics nodding in agreement. When the exercise began, Kayla stayed near the rear of the group, directing movements through a secure channel. While other teams charged headfirst into danger, her squad moved cautiously, using cover and distractions to avoid detection. When they encountered a patrol of instructor-controlled drones, Kayla ordered 2 members to create noise on one side of the field, drawing the enemies away while the rest slipped past unnoticed. Her tactics worked flawlessly, allowing them to reach the flag without firing a single shot. But the real challenge came when they tried to retreat. Enemy reinforcements swarmed their position, cutting off escape routes and forcing them into a tight corner. Panic spread among her teammates, but Kayla remained calm. She quickly scanned the area, spotting a ventilation shaft high above the ground. Without hesitation, she instructed everyone to climb, using nearby debris as makeshift ladders. Once inside the shaft, they crawled silently until they emerged safely on the other side of the battlefield. When the simulation ended, Kayla's team stood victorious, the only group to retrieve the flag without casualties. The instructors were stunned. Commander Draven himself appeared on the holoscreen, his scarred face unreadable as he addressed the winners. "Impressive," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You use cunning over force. Not many can pull that off here." Kayla nodded politely, her faint smile never wavering. To her, this wasn't a victory. It was proof that her methods worked. And she wasn't done proving it. As word of her success spread, Kayla found herself being approached by other cadets seeking advice. At first, it was just a few curious individuals asking how she managed to stay alive during particularly brutal drills. But soon, entire groups started coming to her for guidance. They wanted to know how she stayed calm under pressure, how she analyzed situations so quickly, and how she always seemed to find a way out of impossible scenarios. Kayla didn't mind sharing what she knew. In fact, she enjoyed teaching others. She explained her approach in simple terms, emphasizing observation, adaptability, and teamwork. "Don't focus on winning," she told them. "Focus on staying alive. If you're still standing when everyone else has fallen, then you've already won." Her lessons resonated with many cadets, especially those who struggled with the Academy's relentless emphasis on physical dominance. For the first time, they realized there was another path to success, one that didn't require brute strength or reckless courage. Under Sela's guidance, several teams improved their performance dramatically, earning higher rankings and fewer injuries during exercises. Even some of the instructors began to take notice. Though they initially dismissed her as a fluke, they couldn't ignore the results. Cadets who followed her strategies performed better in simulations, showed greater resilience during endurance tests, and demonstrated improved decision-making skills in high-pressure situations. Slowly but surely, Kala's influence began to reshape the culture of Helios Prime. Of course, not everyone was pleased with her growing reputation. A handful of senior officers viewed her unorthodox methods as a threat to the Academy's traditions. They argued that warfare wasn't about clever tricks or avoiding conflict. It was about crushing enemies and asserting dominance. To them, Kayla represented everything wrong with modern thinking: softness, hesitation, and reliance on intellect rather than action. Commander Draven, however, saw things differently. He'd spent decades training soldiers, watching countless cadets rise and fall based on their ability to endure pain and fear. Yet none of them had ever approached challenges the way Kayla did. Her calm demeanor, analytical mind, and refusal to conform intrigued him. He began observing her more closely, noting how she handled herself in different scenarios. During private debriefings, he questioned her decisions, probing for weaknesses in her logic. But Kayla always had answers, clear, concise, and backed by evidence. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Draven summoned her to his office. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with holographic maps and tactical manuals. He gestured for her to sit, then leaned back in his chair, stunning her with piercing eyes. "You're not like the others," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Most recruits come here because they want to be heroes. They dream of glory, power, revenge. But you don't seem to care about any of that." Kayla tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "I'm not here for glory," she replied softly. "I'm here to learn. To survive. Isn't that why everyone comes?" Draven chuckled darkly. "Maybe, but most don't last long enough to figure it out. You, though," he paused, leaning forward now. "You're different. You see the system for what it is, a flawed, inefficient machine. And you exploit it." Kayla shrugged, her expression unchanged. "If the system is broken, why not fix it?" Her response caught him off guard. For a moment, he simply stared at her, searching for signs of arrogance or defiance. But all he found was sincerity. She wasn't mocking him or the academy. She genuinely believed in what she was saying. After a long pause, Draven leaned back again, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Fine," he said. "Show me how you'd fix it." Over the next few weeks, Kayla presented her ideas to Draven in a series of meetings. She pointed out inefficiencies in training protocols, suggesting changes that would make cadets more adaptable and versatile. She proposed incorporating more problem-solving exercises into the curriculum, arguing that mental agility was just as important as physical strength. She even recommended restructuring the Academy's ranking system to reward teamwork and innovation, rather than individual prowess. To her surprise, Draven listened. Though skeptical at first, he gradually warmed to her suggestions, recognizing their potential to improve the Academy's overall effectiveness. Some changes were implemented immediately, while others required further testing. But the impact was undeniable. Cadets began performing better, instructors reported higher morale, and the Academy's reputation grew stronger than ever. Through it all, Kayla remained humble. She didn't seek recognition or praise. She simply wanted to help people survive. Her smile, once a source of confusion, now symbolized hope for many cadets who had once felt lost in the chaos of Helios Prime. Little did she know, her journey was far from over. The Academy still held plenty of surprises and dangers for her. But one thing was certain. Wherever she went, Kayla Vera left a mark. And that mark was changing Helios Prime forever. By now, Kayla Vera had become a name whispered throughout Helios Prime Academy. Some called her a genius. Others labeled her a troublemaker. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just another cadet trying to survive. She was unraveling the very fabric of the Academy's rigid structure and doing it with a calmness that left everyone around her both impressed and uneasy. The changes she'd suggested to Commander Draven hadn't stopped at minor tweaks to training protocols. Over time, her ideas grew bolder, more ambitious. She began pointing out flaws in the way the Academy operated, not just as a school but as an institution designed to shape warriors. Her observations were sharp, often unsettling, and impossible to ignore. One of her biggest criticisms was the Academy's obsession with hierarchy. Cadets were ranked based on performance in combat simulations, physical endurance tests, and obedience to orders. Those at the top enjoyed privileges, better food, private quarters, access to advanced equipment, while those at the bottom struggled to keep up. This system, Kayla argued, created resentment and division among recruits. It encouraged selfishness rather than teamwork, arrogance instead of humility. During a meeting with Draven, she laid out her case clearly. "If you want cadets to work together," she said, "you can't reward them for stepping on each other's backs. You need to teach them that success isn't about being better than everyone else. It's about making everyone stronger." Draven listened intently, his expression unreadable. He didn't agree with everything she said, but he couldn't deny the logic behind her words. Slowly, he started implementing some of her suggestions. Teams were restructured to include members from different ranks, forcing high performers to collaborate with those who struggled. Rewards were given not to individuals, but to entire squads that achieved objectives together. The shift was subtle but significant, and its effects rippled through the Academy. Kala's influence extended beyond training reforms. As she continued to analyze the Academy's operations, she uncovered deeper issues, flaws hidden beneath layers of tradition and bureaucracy. One of her most startling discoveries came during a simulated invasion exercise. The scenario involved a large-scale attack on a fortified base, with cadets tasked to defend against waves of enemy forces controlled by instructors. Most teams approached the challenge, predictably, fortify defenses, conserve ammunition, and wait for reinforcements. But Kayla noticed something no one else did. The simulation's AI, which controlled enemy movements, followed predictable patterns. After studying these patterns for hours, she realized they could be exploited. Late at night, when most cadets were asleep, Kayla snuck into the Academy's central control room. Using her datapad and a few clever hacks, she accessed the AI network running the simulation. With careful precision, she altered the enemy behavior scripts, introducing random variables that made attacks less predictable and more challenging. Then she added a new feature, real-time feedback for cadets, allowing them to track enemy positions and adjust their strategies accordingly. When the next invasion exercise began, chaos erupted almost immediately. Enemy units moved in unexpected ways, forcing cadets to think on their feet. Panic spread as usual, but this time, Kayla's team thrived. Armed with the real-time data she provided, they anticipated enemy movements, adapted quickly, and turned the tide of battle in their favor. Afterward, Draven demanded an explanation. When Kayla admitted what she'd done, he didn't scold her. Instead, he looked at her with a mix of admiration and frustration. "You hacked into the system?" he asked, his voice low but tinged with awe. "It needed improvement," Kayla replied simply, her tone matter-of-fact. "Now cadets will have to adapt faster. They'll learn to think ahead, not just react." Draven shook his head, muttering under his breath about insubordination. But deep down, he knew she was right. Her modifications made the exercises harder, yes, but also more realistic. And realism was exactly what the Academy claimed to prioritize. As weeks passed, Kayla's reputation grew even further. Cadets began referring to her as the strategist, a title that carried equal parts respect and fear. Some admired her ability to turn weaknesses into strengths. Others resented her for exposing flaws they'd rather ignore. Even among the instructors, opinions were divided. While many recognized her value, others saw her as a threat to the Academy's core principles. This tension reached a boiling point during a particularly brutal survival drill. Recruits were dropped onto a barren moon with limited supplies and told to last 72 hours without contact from the Academy. The environment was harsh, freezing temperatures, toxic storms, and predatory creatures lurking in the shadows. Most cadets focused on finding shelter and food, working in small groups to stay alive. But Kayla took a different approach. Rather than hoarding resources or isolating herself, she rallied several struggling cadets and formed a larger coalition. Together, they pooled their skills and knowledge, creating a makeshift camp that maximized safety and efficiency. When one group found edible plants, another discovered a natural water source, and a third built traps to catch prey. Kayla coordinated their efforts, ensuring everyone contributed equally. Her leadership paid off. By the end of the drill, her coalition had not only survived, but thrived. They returned to the Academy stronger, healthier, and more united than any other group. For the first time, many cadets realized that cooperation could be more powerful than competition, a lesson Kayla had been teaching all along. Despite her successes, Kayla remained humble. She didn't seek glory or recognition. She simply wanted to help people survive. Her smile, once a mystery to those around her, now symbolized resilience and hope. To the cadets she mentored, she was a beacon of calm in a storm of chaos. To the instructors who doubted her, she was a reminder that strength came in many forms, not just brute force, but intelligence, creativity, and compassion. Even Commander Draven found himself softening toward her. Though he still questioned her methods, he couldn't deny the results. Under her influence, the Academy was becoming something new, something better. Cadets were learning to think critically, act decisively, and trust one another. They were becoming not just warriors, but leaders. Still, challenges lay ahead. Not everyone welcomed change, especially in a place as steeped in tradition as Helios Prime. Some senior officers openly opposed Kayla's reforms, arguing that they undermined the Academy's purpose. Others whispered behind closed doors, plotting ways to discredit her or force her out. But Kayla wasn't deterred. If anything, the resistance only strengthened her resolve. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Academy was a machine built to produce killers, and machines didn't change easily. But Kayla believed in the power of adaptation, the idea that even the strongest systems could evolve if pushed in the right direction. And she intended to keep pushing, no matter how hard the fight became as the days turned into months. Kayla's presence continued to transform Helios Prime. What had once been a fortress of fear and brutality was slowly becoming a place of growth and innovation. Cadets trained harder, thought smarter, and fought smarter. Instructors adjusted their methods, focusing less on breaking recruits and more on building them up. Even the Academy's infamous reputation began to shift, from a death trap for the weak to a proving ground for the adaptable. Through it all, Kayla remained steadfast. She faced every challenge with the same quiet confidence, every obstacle with the same analytical precision. Her smile never faded, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. To her, the Academy wasn't just a test of survival, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. And piece by piece, she was putting it back together in her own image. Little did she know, her greatest challenge was yet to come. Graduation loomed on the horizon, bringing with it a final test unlike anything she or anyone else had ever faced. But Kayla wasn't worried. She trusted in her abilities, her instincts, and the lessons she'd taught herself along the way. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready. The day finally arrived. Graduation at Helios Prime Academy wasn't a celebration. It was a trial by fire. The final test was known as the Crucible, a full-scale war game that pitted cadets against veteran instructors, armed with non-lethal weapons but real-world tactics. Failure meant expulsion or worse, public disgrace in front of the entire Academy. Success ensured entry into the ranks of intergalactic elites. For Kayla Vera, this was her last chance to prove not just herself, but everything she had taught others during her time here. The battlefield chosen for. The Crucible was vast and unforgiving, a sprawling desert littered with jagged rocks, deep trenches, and abandoned ruins. Scorching winds whipped sand into cyclones, obscuring vision and testing endurance. Hidden among the terrain were traps, automated turrets, and drones programmed to hunt down anyone who dared step out of cover. It was chaos designed to break even the strongest warriors, and yet, Kayla walked onto the field with the same calm smile she'd worn since the day she arrived. Her team consisted of recruits from all walks of life, some skilled fighters, others strategists, and a few who barely scraped by during training. But they trusted Kayla. Over months of drills and exercises, she had earned their loyalty not through orders or fear, but through guidance and trust. They knew she wouldn't lead them blindly into danger. She would find a way to win, even if no one thought victory was possible. As the simulation began, the air crackled with tension. Instructor-led squads moved swiftly across the battlefield, cutting off escape routes and setting up ambush. Most cadet teams panicked, scattering like prey under attack. Some tried to fight back, only to be overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. But Kayla's team stayed together, moving as one cohesive unit under her direction. "Stay low," she instructed over the comm channel, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're not fighting them head-on. We're finding their weak points." She directed her team toward a cluster of ruins on the edge of the map. From there, they could observe enemy movements without being seen. Using binoculars and portable scanners, they mapped out patrol patterns, identified blind spots, and pinpointed key locations where instructors gathered supplies or regrouped after skirmishes. Every piece of information mattered. To Kayla, knowledge was power, and right now, it was their greatest weapon. Once she had enough data, Kayla devised a plan. Instead of engaging directly, her team would strike indirectly, targeting supply lines and communication hubs. By disrupting the instructor's ability to coordinate, they could weaken their advantage and create openings for counterattacks. It was risky. It relied heavily on timing and precision, but Kayla believed it could work. The first phase of the plan went smoothly. Under cover of darkness, Kayla led her team to an isolated supply depot guarded by 2 instructors. While most of the squad created noise nearby to draw attention away, Kayla and a small group infiltrated the area. With quick, silent movements, they disabled the guards using tranquilizer darts and destroyed the supplies with timed explosives. When the instructors realized what had happened, it was too late. Their forces were already stretched thin. But the real challenge came later, when Kayla decided to take on Commander Draven himself. He had positioned himself at the center of the battlefield, commanding his troops with ruthless efficiency. No one dared approach him, not because he was unbeatable, but because doing so felt like walking straight into a trap. Yet Kayla saw an opportunity. If they could neutralize Draven, the instructor's chain of command would collapse, leaving their forces disorganized and vulnerable. Her team hesitated when she explained the plan. "Are you sure about this?" one recruit asked nervously. "Draven isn't someone we can outsmart easily." Kayla smiled faintly, her confidence unwavering. "He's strong," she admitted. "But strength alone isn't enough. Let's show him why." Using decoys and false signals, Kayla lured Draven into a narrow canyon surrounded by high cliffs. Once he was inside, her team triggered a series of rock slides, sealing off the exits and trapping him temporarily. Then, while he struggled to free himself, Kayla confronted him face to face. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Draven's armor gleamed menacingly in the dim light, his scarred face unreadable. Kayla stood before him unarmed, her expression calm and composed. "You don't have to fight me," she said softly. "You've already lost." Draven chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "Lost? My men are still out there. You think this little stunt changes anything?" "It does," Kayla replied. "Because now they're leaderless. And your system, you built it to rely on hierarchy. Without you, it falls apart." Draven didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine," he growled. "You win. But don't think this makes you untouchable." Kayla nodded politely, then signaled her team to retreat. As they disappeared into the shadows, Draven couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the woman who had outwitted him. She wasn't just clever, she was dangerous in ways he hadn't anticipated. When the simulation ended, silence fell over the battlefield. Cadets emerged cautiously from hiding spots, unsure whether they had passed or failed. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd, not just from cadets, but from instructors as well. Even Draven joined in, clapping slowly as he approached Kayla. "You either made a huge mistake coming here," he said, his tone gruff but tinged with admiration, "or you're exactly what this academy needed." Kayla smiled softly, her expression unchanged. "Maybe both," she replied. Later that evening, the academy held a ceremony to honor the graduating class. Kayla stood alongside her teammates, accepting her insignia with quiet dignity. Around her, cheers erupted as names were called and accolades awarded. But for many, the true star of the night was Kayla Vera, the woman who had smiled through chaos and changed Elias Prime forever. In the weeks that followed, stories of her achievements spread across the galaxy. Future generations of cadets spoke of the strategist who turned weakness into strength, who proved that intelligence could rival brute force, and who showed that survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about adapting. And somewhere far away, in the depths of the intergalactic administrative hub, Zog sighed in relief. His clerical chaos had inadvertently sent Kayla to the deadliest academy in the galaxy. But instead of falling victim to it, she had risen above it all while wearing that enigmatic smile that hinted she knew something no one else did. Kayla's journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning.